test day. I've made it to the test center. I do feel nervous, but I mostly just feel really excited to have it done. So I'm hoping for good things, and this can be my only time taking this test. There are people already lining up outside of the doors and I'm here 35 minutes early, so I guess I'll go join them. I did bring, you have to bring 2 forms of identification. So I brought my passport and I brought my license. Apparently they're going to palm scan us. I don't know if that's to see if you are who you say you are, or if that's to make sure you don't have anything written. I'm not for sure. And then they also take our like ID picture, and by the time that I leave this test and come back and see you, I will know if I'm licensed or not. So that's big. Should I do a little transition? Oh, hi, I'm Anna. I'm trying to be a licensed social worker. As of today, I might be. So, okay, transition till after the test. Deep breaths. I haven't looked yet. I have my paper and they handed it to me face down, and in that moment I was like, I don't want to see. And so I carried it upside down all the way to here. Initial thoughts and reactions before we even look is that I started to feel way more anxious thinking about getting the result than I did like about my answers of the test, if that makes sense. Should we find out? I felt fine going into the test, but as I stood up and was walking out and like turning my little lock to get the stuff out of my locker and like walking to the desk, because you press submit on your test and then you take a survey about your experience and then you have to turn in like your scrap little whiteboard, and they check your ID again and they scan your palm on the way out again to make sure you're still who you say you are, and then you walk to the front and get all of the stuff and empty out your locker and give them your locker key, and then they hand you the paper. So that whole time I was like, anyways, I'm gonna try not to peek, but I'm gonna try to cover up like my name, okay, or like my identifying information. You want to see first? What's it say? I passed. Happy tears. Oh gosh. I think this is just the first time I've cried on my channel. I'm a licensed social worker. Well, this is really exciting. I think we'll do a better reflection later on in the day. My plan is to go get a little smoothie bowl from a place that I saw was nearby, and then I am headed into work today. These are happy tears. It just feels big. God. Okay, I'm gonna take some time to myself. Now it's time to eat my smoothie bowl and watch, what should I watch? Like YouTube videos? I don't know, something fun in my car. I gave myself until 1 to show up to work because I didn't know how long it would take me to test, and it's 10:30 now, so I'm just gonna vibe out a little bit.
You said, son, you'll remember this day for the rest of your life. I think he's right. Mom said, now you've got something new to write about tonight. I think she's right. I paid my dues and waited my turn, and the rest of my life starts today. Put in the work and now I can finally say that everything is gonna be okay. Damn, it feels good to say that everything is gonna be okay. Yeah, yeah. Welcome to the good life, but don't forget.
So now that the celebrating is done, I did want to give just a rundown of the entire licensing process. Not too in depth. Maybe I'll do like a future video once I've had more time to actually think things out and everything, but the actual reflection. starting with the application process and the scheduling process. So I'm in the state of Georgia. I had to wait until my final transcript was absolutely conferred, complete, done before I could apply to be licensed in my state. And so once my final transcript was done, I prepared my application, which included various documents, including like my transcript, form of identification. It had to get notarized, 2 letters of reference, and then a series of questions just like, did you finish your degree? Did you do your field placement? That type of thing. I sent my application into the board, I believe on July 1st is when I sent it in. And then it was in the middle of August when I heard back from the board that I was approved to sit and take my exam. So it was about a 6-week process for me. That can vary state to state. Once I was approved to take my exam, the state board sent a number to me essentially that then I could log on to ASWB's website, and it was like proof that I was approved to take the exam, and then I could actually schedule the exam. Originally I had scheduled my exam for December. I don't really know why. I think I was trying to give myself time to study but still get it done in 2022 because that was my goal. But after a while, I just decided that I felt like December was so far away and I felt like I was kind of as ready as I would be. And so I moved the exam up. I ended up finding a perfect time slot for me. Honestly, I ended up switching the exam around quite a few times, waiting for one to open up. And October 3rd at 8 a.m. ended up opening up, which ended up being great for me. And so I scheduled it then. Sorry, the sun keeps coming like in and out of the clouds and I keep noticing my light changing on the camera. To prepare, I began by taking the diagnostic practice test from Dawn Apgar's study materials. That test is meant to be taken after you've studied a little bit to see where you still need to study more. But since I had come pretty freshly out of grad school, I felt like I knew quite a bit of the information. I just needed to know where I did need to brush up more. And so I took that practice test, sat down, took it full, and ended up with a passing score. I think I got 136 on that practice test, so I was sitting pretty okay, but it also broke down the areas that I was scoring low in, which for me personally mostly were the first next best questions because there are a lot of application situational questions on the exam. Some of it you do need to know terms, vocab, diagnoses, medications, but not too much. A lot of them are the application questions. So really I just needed to know what the test thought would be right. I took a little break from studying and really picked back up again in September, honestly just in the past month. I ended up reading through the Dawn Apgar book, the 3rd edition I think it is, like the master's edition. I read through it because it has all of the information kind of that you need, but I will say that despite reading through it, there were some terms that came up on the test that were not in the book, and I also don't think the book focused as much on community type questions as showed up on the exam. So that's just something to note. But I read through that book. I watched lots of Agents of Change YouTube videos, which I found were really helpful for the information, and then some of the practice question videos were helpful as well. I watched some of Phil Luttrell videos because I've seen a lot of people recommend that YouTube channel, and I think that could be really helpful for people. What happened with me though is I felt that the process of breaking down the questions was far too complex, and even the practice questions were far too complex, and so I found myself not always agreeing with some of the answers in those practice question videos, or sometimes just feeling like we did a whole lot of thinking in a whole roundabout way that didn't necessarily need to be done to get to the right answer. The YouTube videos that ended up being the most helpful for me were Savvy Social Work exam prep YouTube videos. I think that is my #1 recommendation, and why I really liked her videos. 1, there's a lot of practice questions on there, but 2, the way she breaks them down is enough that you can get questions correct, but it doesn't overcomplicate it at all. Overcomplicate it at all. She really focuses on, in the situation, like what is the presenting problem, and then making sure that your answer choice is addressing that presenting problem from the question. There are things that I was kind of missing that would be like a question would ask, how can the social worker best assist this client? And I would kind of just glance over that verb and not pay attention to the fact that it said assist. But the fact that it was saying assist meant that we were already looking at intervention because we were looking at how the social worker was supposed to be assisting. And so you could eliminate out any answer choices that were not interventions. Things like that just made so much sense to me that I was totally missing by myself and that I didn't really hear anyone else talk about. So I personally feel like the most helpful to me was Savvy Social Work on YouTube. but I didn't end up watching her videos until just like a couple days before the exam. I took the practice test at the end of the Dawn Apgar book on Friday when my exam was on Monday, and ended up scoring lower on that one than I did on the first one that I took, and ended up scoring lower on that one than I did on the actual exam too. So just something to note. Definitely the most helpful thing though is finding and going through practice questions, because then you can see really what they're going to ask you. Well, you can see how they're going to ask you about what they're going to ask you about, because I think that really is the most important thing. So day of the test process, I could not sleep the night before. I was waking up like on the hour starting at 12:30, like 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, but I had my alarm set for 5:45, so 5:45 came around. I got up, made sure I kind of just took a slow morning where I had enough time to feel confident about everything I needed to do, got dressed. I feel like maybe this was kind of helpful for me, but I was going to go into work obviously after the test, and so I got dressed in like work apparel, so I think I kind of felt like my professional self, and I gave myself a lot of extra time to drive to the testing center. My testing center was about 30 minutes away from me, so I ended up leaving probably about 6:55 whenever my test was scheduled to start at 8 a.m. They say to get there 30 minutes before your exam is to start because there's a whole check-in process that you have to do. So I got there pretty much right at 7:30. You really can't bring too much in with you into the exam, or whatever you do bring into the building, they'll have you check in like a personal belongings locker. I'm not positive what can get brought into the exam room. I personally didn't bring anything, but I think there's certain regulations about if you need a water bottle, like it has to be clear, it has to be something certain, whatever it is, but all of that is on their website, so if you are curious about that. But it's even as much as like you can't wear a watch, like just various kind of things like that, which you don't need to because it shows the time on the computer, but definitely good to read over what you can and cannot bring before going into the testing center. When I arrived at the testing center, it kind of felt like the DMV, not gonna lie, because there was rows of chairs and it had you like pull a number whenever you came in. I don't know if this is different among different testing centers, but they do use Pearson testing centers, so I do think that the regulations are kind of the same throughout if you're taking your social work exam. My exam was at the same time as an internal medicine exam, so people kept calling me doctor, which I thought was kind of funny. Being like, actually I'm here for the social work exam, but thank you. But took a number, sat down in the seat. They passed out a candidate rules agreement that basically was just like showing the rules of the testing center so that you could, be informed about everything. And then they started calling up numbers of people to get checked in. I was number 9, and I walked up to the desk whenever they called me, and they ask you your full name, ask you to spell it, and you have to have 2 forms of identification. There's a whole list of different things that can be the identification. There's like a primary list and a secondary list. I just brought my driver's license and my passport with me because I knew that that would be good, that would be solid, but I think your second form can even be like a debit card, a credit card, things like that. It doesn't have to be another picture ID. Also found on the website. They check your identification, they scan your palm, which is kind of interesting. They scan both palms, they take your picture, and then you get to put all of your personal belongings in a locker. So I put everything that I had in my locker except for my driver's license, because you have to carry your ID around with you, and then it was just me, my driver's license, and the little locker key, and we walked to the actual testing room where they checked me in again, scanned my palm again, did like kind of a miniature search. It kind of felt like a miniature search because I'm used to going to jail every day, but they just had me like pull my sleeves up, lift the back of my hair up, made sure there were no pockets. You just have to like flip them inside out or show that they were empty if you did have pockets. Checked my ID again. They give you erasable paper, like it's like laminated paper, so it's not really a dry erase board but acts like it, and a dry erase pen. And then they take you into the testing center, into your little computer booth, and log you in, get you started. The actual online test itself is on just that's the only thing that's going to be on the computer. It gives you a tutorial of how to use the testing electronic program thing before you actually begin your test. And the tutorial was pretty helpful, but it wasn't that hard of a thing to understand too much, because obviously if you take the ASWB practice exam before taking your real exam, you'll be familiar with that software because it's the same that they use for the practice exam, but I'd never seen it before and it really was just fine. You can highlight, you can strike through, you can flag questions for review. It was alright to learn. The test itself, you get 4 hours to take it. To my understanding, most people get done pretty early with it. It's not, you don't have to work fast. Honestly, I think sometimes that if you start reviewing questions over too much, it can actually end up hurting you because you'll start convincing yourself of wrong answers and going against your gut instinct. But you do get 4 hours. I finished in, I think it was about 2.5. I ended up being back out in my car by 10:30. The things that were hard for me that I wasn't really expecting while sitting down and taking the test, the duration of it is hard, just like sitting and being there at the computer for that whole long time. You can take unscheduled breaks. I never actually stood up from my seat or anything, but I'm pretty sure if you do, you kind of raise your hand and you can like step out and like get a drink of water if you need, do some stretches if you need, which I know that some people definitely suggest because you do have so much extra time, and 170 questions is a whole lot to just sit through and do. It is 170 questions. Only 150 of them are actually scored that go towards your exam. 20 of them are there just testing for future exams, but you don't know which of those 20 it is. And I really did start to struggle to stay focused. So it ended up being where I'd be sitting in my chair and I'd start doing some stretches, taking some deep breaths, like making sure my brain could stay awake because it did start to feel long for sure. The other thing that I wasn't expecting to bug me was the fact that it was so quiet in the computer lab. It was pretty much dead silent except for like other people's mouse clicks, which started to be really distracting to me. They do have noise canceling headphones that are there, but I just don't really use noise canceling headphones, and I felt like that kind of silence would be even more distracting to me. So I was very grateful when a lawnmower started mowing outside, and that was like the perfect amount of white noise for me. But it was just something that, I don't know, was different than the study environments that I had been in, because I feel like everywhere that you are in your home, there's probably at least a little bit of noise, whether it's like AC or the dishwasher running or the dryer or someone mowing, something. There's just always a little bit of noise. And in the beginning of my test, it was dead silent except for the mouse clicks, which really threw me off. As far as my process goes, whenever I was taking the test, I did all the questions in order. I was eliminating as I went. I ended up highlighting just like various things that I felt like might be important in the question. I feel like using the highlighter tool just helped me stay focused. I was using different colors, not with any kind of code or strategy with them, just because it was fun to use different colors at times. But I did flag for review any of the ones that I didn't feel sure about. And I have seen in some study like videos on YouTube from different people and things that they say there's really no reason for you to flag for review because you should just know the answer or know which answer choice you're going to choose and feel confident about before even moving on, because lots of times you could come back and look at a question and then what you initially picked, your gut instinct would be correct, but you start convincing yourself of the wrong answers. So I have seen where people suggest not to do that. Honestly, why I did it was I flagged for review every question that I wasn't sure of, and by the end of it, I had flagged 48 questions, which is a lot of questions to flag, but doing the math with 48 and with taking out the 20 questions that would be test questions, that I already felt pretty confident that I was getting at least a 102. And so that's mostly why I flagged those for reviews, because then it was like, maybe that's a passing rate, maybe that's not going to be, but I was pretty close to knowing that maybe it was going to be a passing rate. So I did go back through every question that I had flagged for review, and I didn't change any answers unless I had an aha moment or like truly more clarity than I had the first time that I went through. And so by the time that I reviewed through all the questions, it was 115 questions that I felt pretty positive sure about, which 115, granted, like I definitely would have still missed some of those, but then also some of the ones I wasn't sure about I definitely could still have gotten right, but 115 would have been a passing rate no matter what. The passing rates for the test vary to kind of scale it for their difficulty, and you don't know how many you have to get right when you're taking the test, but it's anywhere between, I believe, 96 and 110, I think is what it is, maybe 108, I forget the upper number, but you don't know when you're taking the test how many is required for you to get right in order to pass. Some things I saw that showed up in the questions quite a bit. Lots of clients' rights questions, just knowing like how to protect confidentiality, what the limits of confidentiality are. Can clients have access to their own records? What happens if you get a subpoena? That type of thing, that showed up a lot. A couple conflict management questions, like if you see a coworker do something, how do you address that? If you disagree with something a supervisor tells you, how do you address that? A few diagnosis questions where it just gives you a couple lines about a client and then says like what most likely is the diagnosis. Those ones honestly I found to be really easy because it was quite clear what diagnosis they were pointing you to in the question, and so I honestly didn't find those to be that hard at all. And kind of the bummer thing is I'm never going to know which ones I actually got right and got wrong because it doesn't tell you that. It just tells you how many you got right. The ones that really tripped me up, honestly, that I just did not feel confident in were the medication questions. And I really think that was a fault of how I studied because I never tested to see if I actually knew what medications did which things. I know medications that my clients are on or my previous clients have been on. And other than that, I kind of just recognize the names and none of the medications that my clients have been on were on the test. It was different ones, so I tried to like word associate, see like which ones had the same endings and stuff, and I think I ended up guessing 2 of them right. Like I remembered and looked up afterwards, but the medication ones threw me off because there's no like context clues for which medication it's going to be. It really is like, this medication is most commonly used to treat which symptom, and there's 4 symptoms, so there's no context clues to narrow anything down. Or like a client is diagnosed with schizophrenia, which medication is most likely prescribed to them, and then just like 4 medications. So those ones were kind of hard because I never really tested myself knowing if I knew them. I just assumed that I did, and I didn't. Quite a few questions came up about definitions of different terms relating to the LGBTQIA+ population. Most of those really just were knowing terms. I really do think that the best strategy, and what I kept going back to during the test, was like Savvy Social Workers exam prep videos were, just looking at the question saying, okay, like what is the presenting problem? Because sometimes there's extra information thrown in there that you don't necessarily need, or it's not necessary to the problem. But if the presenting problem, like the reason the client came to you is, say, because they're feeling anxious or something, then whatever you're doing next has to relate to that somehow. You're not just going to all of a sudden conduct a risk assessment if there's nothing in the question that's pointing you to that, you know? Or if the question asks, like I mentioned before, how will the social worker assist this client? If you're already at the assisting, the intervention, then your answer choice has to be an intervention. What I did find with the situation questions is that they were a lot more simple than a lot of the practice questions that I have seen online, specifically Phil Luttrell's, but also I know that he does LCSW exam prep too, so I don't know if those questions are different, but I did find that a lot of the questions on the exam were, I won't say more simple, but had less convoluted information going on than some of the practice questions that I have seen. Overall though, after I went over the 48 that I had in review, that's when I started to feel anxious, when I was kind of getting towards the end, because then I was thinking I'm about to have to press submit, and then I'm gonna have to figure out and find out whether or not I passed. And I forget which part of this I explained yesterday, but basically I finally clicked submit on my questions. It said, are you sure? I said yes. It said, if you say yes again, you're not going to be able to go back and alter any of your answers. And I said, sounds good, I am done. After you're done, it had like a 12-question survey about my experience and how I prepared, and did I feel like my school prepared me. Like, it was just a survey. And then after my survey, one of the workers at the test center came and like escorted me out. They scan your palm on the way out too, and check your ID on the way out too, I guess just to make sure that you are who you said you are. And then I walked back to the front and I emptied out my personal locker and I handed them my key. And whenever I handed them my key, that's when they handed me that flipped over piece of paper. And then obviously you caught up with me after we had that flipped over piece of paper. So that piece of paper now kind of serves as a temporary, kind of like when you get your driver's license and you're waiting for it in the mail, and so you have that piece of paper. That's kind of what that piece of paper does, because now the exam center and ASWB has to like send to Georgia that I passed, and then Georgia will, I guess, send me my license using that picture. It really was an ugly picture that it took of me too. I almost wanted to ask them to redo it, but I didn't, so. But that's okay. In the grand scheme of things, that's okay. If you have any questions, definitely let me know, because this is definitely something that could do a future Q&A on, if I missed anything, or if there's anything that you're curious about that I didn't talk about. Because like I said, this is just like my brain pouring out. I feel like I've been storing up all of these thoughts in my head about my experience and everything, and this is my outlet, because you guys get it. There's not too many other people. Do I actually know? I don't know anyone with an LMSW in Georgia. So you are my outlet. Other people have the license, I just don't know them. But yeah, definitely let me know what you would like future information on, what I could talk more about, because now I'm on the other side of it, which feels pretty fun. Remember to have grace with yourself, and as always, find so many small reasons to smile in your day, and I'll see you next time.